I am Nancy, and I have an older brother named Keith who is 7 years my senior. Keith has always been academically exceptional since childhood, consistently delivering top-notch performances. He graduated from a prestigious high school and university, making our parents immensely proud. However, the constant praise and high expectations seemed to shape his personality in an unexpected way as he grew older. After completing his education and securing a new job, Keith decided to leave our family home. During his departure, he sarcastically remarked about being unable to endure the mundane life in our house any longer. I can vividly recall the mixed emotions on our parents' faces at that moment: surprise and the hint of sadness. In the past, Keith was a cheerful and cherished member of the family. Personally, I felt a twinge of anger. I never excelled academically or in sports like my brother did. My high school wasn't super prestigious, but I valued the warmth and love within our family. Both Keith and I owe our lives to our parents' support. It saddened me that he seemed to overlook the importance of our family bonds. As a child, Keith was my hero, handling everything perfectly and caring for me. However, as I approached graduation from high school, he began questioning the need for higher education and dismissed my pursuits. When confronted by our parents, he blamed them for his changed attitude. Despite the challenges, I persevered, entering a national university and securing a job at my dream company. My parents' encouragement helped shape me into a kind-hearted person. However, my brother's life took a different turn. He was already married, and neither my parents nor I had met his wife. One day during work hours, I received an unexpected call from my mother. Worried about the unusual call, I stepped outside to answer discreetly. My mother's voice, softer than usual, revealed that my father had suddenly fallen ill. Distressed by the news, I immediately informed my supervisor, rushed to the hospital, and hoped for the best. Entering the waiting room, I was met with my mother in tears, desperately seeking comfort. Anxious, I asked, "What happened, Mom?" I anxiously sat beside my mother, struggling to comprehend how my father, who seemed perfectly fine that morning, had suddenly ended up in this condition. My words tumbled out one after another as I asked the question that refused to settle in my mind. After a brief pause, my mother quietly uttered, "Your father has been diagnosed with cancer." Time seemed to freeze as the weight of her words sank in. The surprise and anxiety within me spilled out in my voice. My mother took a deep breath and, with a tone heavy with sadness, continued, "It's stage 4. The cancer has spread to the bile duct, and they said it's hard to remove it all." Her tears flowed uncontrollably, and I struggled to find words as I listened to this devastating news. Seeking a glimmer of hope, I inquired about the next steps in treatment. My mother nodded somberly, and after a short pause, the attending physician arrived to explain the detailed condition and treatment options. The grim reality hit us as we learned that the illness had progressed more than expected, with confirmed metastasis to other parts. The doctor conveyed the significant risks of surgery and the uncertainty of success. My mother and I, holding hands, tried to come to terms with this harsh reality. The doctor's matter-of-fact words emphasized the gravity of the situation. We were faced with crucial choices: continuing with chemotherapy or opting for support in a palliative care ward. The heavy silence in the waiting room was broken only by the ticking of the clock's second hand. As tears quietly streamed down my mother's face, I pondered how to approach the situation. Despite the challenging circumstances, necessary discussions needed to take place. Realizing the importance of including my brother Keith, I suggested contacting him immediately to make a decision together. With a forced smile, my mother admitted that she had already informed Keith, but he hadn't responded. Recalling my brother's nature and past events, I had a premonition of his potential reaction. Keith tended to get upset when seeking help, avoiding tough decisions. Determined to involve the entire family in this critical decision, I persisted in calling him. After more than 10 attempts, I finally heard my brother's slightly irritated voice. "Why do you keep calling me?" he snapped. Urgently and anxiously, I explained Dad's condition, questioning why he hadn't come to the hospital despite being informed. His response lacked empathy or understanding, shaking me to the core. Unmoved by the gravity of the situation, he dismissed it as unnecessary concern, stating, "There's no point in discussing further. I'm hanging up." Stunned, I was left reeling from the exchange. I found myself in a state of bewilderment, unable to conceal my astonishment at my brother's indifference. I was aware of his lack of a sense of family bond and gratitude, but the extent of his detachment was beyond what I had anticipated. When I returned to my mother, a look of concern was evident on her face. In response to her inquiry about what happened, I explained that it seemed he was quite busy, avoiding the details. My mother sighed deeply, murmuring that it would have been comforting if Keith was here. My father, choosing to spend his final moments in a palliative care ward, quietly passed away a few months after that decision. I conveyed this somber news to my brother over the phone and provided details of the wake and funeral. However, his response was cold, stating he was too busy with work to attend, urging us to proceed without him. True to his word, he didn't appear at our father's wake or funeral. Even my mother seemed shocked by this fact, likely never imagining her son wouldn't show up for his father's funeral. Both family and acquaintances expressed surprise and disappointment at his absence. After the funeral, in a moment of quiet reflection amongst the family, my mother sighed deeply, muttering to herself that he really didn't come. I took her hand and reassured her, saying firmly, "Mom, let's not worry about him anymore. We have to let him walk his path. For now, let's cherish our memories of Dad." My mother tightly squeezed my hand in response, smiling and saying, "Thank you." Unexpectedly, the next day, my older brother appeared at the apartment where we live. His usual expression was replaced with an urgent restlessness. Without any greeting, he demanded to know, "Where is the inheritance father left behind?" Shocked by his demand, I emotionally retorted, expressing disbelief at someone who didn't even attend the funeral now making such inquiries. Visibly irritated, my brother snapped at me, saying, "The kid should stay quiet," creating a tense atmosphere. Attempting to calm the situation, my mother explained that, apart from the apartment, our father didn't leave much behind. She presented my father's passbook on the table, flipping through it to reveal that all the savings were transferred to a different account. My brother, taken aback, asked in surprise, "What is this all about?" Gently, my mother replied, "Your father instructed to move all the money to my account earlier. Also, this apartment's name has been changed, and now it's in my name." Left speechless, my brother clicked his tongue in frustration and left. Watching his departing figure, we were once again filled with admiration and gratitude for our father's foresight and his plan to protect the family. A few months later, my mother unexpectedly fell and was rushed to the hospital. The family was filled with shock and concern upon learning that she had pneumonia in a more advanced stage than initially thought. Despite feeling relieved when she was diagnosed with a minor cold at a small clinic, detailed examinations at a major hospital revealed a much more severe condition with only about 3 months to live. Hearing this news left me at a loss for words. I found it hard to believe, especially considering how healthy she appeared. Tragically, just a few days after the 3-month mark, my mother quietly passed away. The absence left behind an indescribable stillness and sorrow. Filled with guilt and grief, I questioned why I hadn't noticed sooner or taken her to a larger hospital immediately. Even after learning about my mother's pain, my brother showed no signs of coming to our house. My aunt, my mother's sister, and I handled the arrangements for the wake and the funeral. Understandably, it was a significant shock for my aunt that my brother didn't appear at our mother's last rites, just as he hadn't for our father's. Although my aunt was extremely outraged, I felt that expecting anything or saying anything to my brother was meaningless, recalling his past actions. However, a few days after the funeral, as my aunt and I were sorting out the heirlooms, my brother appeared again, accompanied by his wife, whom we were meeting for the first time. "Where's Mom's inheritance? She must have left something, right?" My brother brought up this question from the beginning. I was both shocked and dumbfounded. My aunt, equally stunned, stared at him in disbelief. The most astonishing thing was that beside my brother stood his wife, my new sister-in-law, who neither met our eyes nor greeted us, just standing silently next to my brother. Even more shocking was that my brother did not even visit our mother's grave. Brother, please at least pay your respects to our parents. At the very least, visit Mom's grave, I said calmly. With a sneering laugh, my brother responded, "Does that even mean anything?" He quickly followed with, "By the way, how much of Mom's inheritance is left?" At that moment, May's expression changed drastically. In a voice filled with anger, contrasting with her usual warmth, she sternly admonished Keith. "How can you think of such things at a time like this? Nancy is managing the funeral on behalf of both of you, putting in all her effort. Shouldn't you act with a bit of gratitude, thinking of your parents?" Ignoring our aunt's anger, my brother responded dismissively, "Auntie, it's none of your business. Don't interfere." With these demands from my brother and sister-in-law, the atmosphere in the room became cold and tense. Behind my brother, my smiling sister-in-law said, "Of course, I remember your name, Nancy. Do you plan to keep all of your mother's inheritance for yourself?" "Sorry, but we can't allow that. This apartment is so lovely. I think it's perfect for us." I never imagined that my brother and his wife would say such things. "Why should I have to leave for the sake of both of you?" I asked, my voice quivering. While twirling her finger, my sister-in-law continued, "This apartment has just been renovated, and its location is amazing. It's close to the station, and there are plenty of shops, so we'll be living here." At the peak of my anger, I confronted my big brother, asking, "All you care about is the inheritance. What are you thinking?" Unable to hold back, I raised my voice, turning away. My brother let out a heavy sigh. Such vulgar behavior. "Do you think raising your voice solves everything? We'll be back here in 3 days. Have everything ready to move out by then." With those words, their intentions became crystal clear. A mix of my anger and sadness bubbled up, and I couldn't stop my tears from flowing. But this wasn't just a one-time event. I had to think about what to do next. Determined, I wiped my tears, and my aunt gently tapped my shoulder, handing me a letter. The delicate handwriting of my mother adorned the envelope's surface. "What's this, Auntie?" I cautiously opened the envelope, my aunt explaining, "Your mother entrusted this to me for a just-in-case scenario. She told me to give it to you at the right moment." Tears formed in her eyes as I unfolded the paper inside. My mother's beautiful handwriting filled the page. "To my precious Nancy, if you are reading this letter, it means I'm no longer in this world. I'm truly sorry for our parting," it began. A warmth filled the back of my eyes, tears beginning to flow. The letter continued, "You might have Keith visit the house concerning the inheritance, but don't worry. Everything that your father handed down to me is now yours." I was at a loss for words, unaware that my mother had thought this far ahead and prepared everything in advance. The letter expressed her apologies for leaving me alone suddenly, but mentioned she was at peace, having witnessed how much I had grown into a wonderful person. "While learning is essential, it's not everything. The kindness and compassion you learn through your interactions with people hold the most value," she wrote. Expressing pride in me, my mother stated, "Your father and I were genuinely happy to see you grow up with such a warm heart until our last days." The letter conveyed heartfelt gratitude, leaving me overwhelmed. Despite the tears blurring the words, I was determined to take in every sentiment my mother had conveyed and continued reading. She revealed that following my father's wishes, she had secretly changed the apartment's ownership to my name. "I'm sorry for using your seal without permission, but it was both your father's and my wish. Please don't be angry," she wrote. The letter encouraged me to persevere through life's ups and downs, urging me to stay strong and find happiness. The letter ended, and tears streamed down my face, wetting the paper. My aunt, standing next to me, pressed her eyes and shed tears alongside me. "Your sister truly cared about you. In her heart, you were a treasure," my aunt said gently, holding my hand. From the envelope, a bank book in my name emerged, revealing a substantial amount, likely the inheritance my mother had saved for me. A few days later, my brother and his wife showed up at the house without even knocking on the door. "It's time for you to leave, just as promised, right?" my brother sarcastically said. As I stood still, my sister-in-law became irritated, demanding, "Isn't it your duty to leave quickly?" I took a deep breath, looked them straight in the eyes, and calmly stated, "Actually, this house is now under my name." The room's atmosphere became tense. My brother and his wife looked at each other, exclaiming, "What kind of joke is this? I am the eldest son. I should inherit the house, right?" My brother said, clearly shaken. Beside him, my sister-in-law stared at me, saying, "This is the first I've heard of this." However, I had decided to state the facts. The house and the inheritance are all managed under my name, so there's nothing to divide. My brother frowned and insisted, "Then hand over half of that inheritance to us." I questioned, "But this money was left for my future and to ensure that I take care of the house. You always looked down on me, and now you're asking for money. What changed?" His face turned red, and surprisingly, my sister-in-law exclaimed, "Wait, what is this? This isn't what we were expecting." From what I gathered, my brother recently faced significant trouble at his job and was subsequently fired. Not only that, but he and his wife were moving from one day job to another, seemingly in a tight spot financially. With my revelation, their expectations were shattered, and they began bickering, placing blame on one another. Calmly, I said, "This is my house now. If you make any unnecessary fuss, I'll call the police." Trembling with anger, they reluctantly accepted my words and left. Since then, I've had no contact with them. I deliberately deleted all their contact details and began a new life in this apartment, my treasure filled with memories of my father and mother. Now I have a loving partner by my side, and we plan to build a new family in this apartment. He respects my decision and proposed that we take the first step of our new life here. Our future is bright, and I want to pass on the warm love my parents gave me to the children we will have in the future.
So here's the deal. I'm going to buy that fancy car from you. Margareta doesn't need it. She's just a regular person. My parents mentioned they wanted a new car, and since I got married to Brandon, he's been acting pretty selfish. He's been eyeing up the nice car my parents gave me, and I've had enough of it. My name's Margareta. I'm 25, and I met Brandon in college. We've been married for 2 years now. Brandon is outgoing and popular. Unlike me, I'm shy and don't have many friends. We started talking more during college classes, then we began studying together. I never thought someone like Brandon would be interested in me, but he surprised me by asking me out. I was really happy and said yes right away. That's how our relationship started. It made sense why I liked Brandon. He was handsome, friendly, and serious about his studies. But for him, things should have been different. He had lots of cute, stylish female friends. Finding another girlfriend wouldn't have been hard for him. Once, I bravely asked him, "Do you really think I'm the right one for you?" He seemed surprised and asked why I was bringing it up. I admitted, I'm not very confident. I wanted to know why he chose me. After thinking for a moment, he said, "I guess it's comfortable being with you." I wasn't satisfied, but before I could say anything, he seemed annoyed and started playing with his phone. Not wanting to argue, I quickly ended the conversation. "Yeah, you're right. Sorry for bringing it up." Even though I still had doubts, our relationship kept going smoothly. Time passed quickly. We finished college, got married, and moved into a condo. I got a job at a regular company while Brandon went off to do more school and research. When I told my mom we were getting married, she was really happy. She said, "That's great news." We were starting to worry. "We thought you'd introduce us to a boyfriend sooner." I felt bad for not telling them about Brandon earlier, but Mom understood. She said I've always been independent, handling things on my own. Knowing Brandon was there for me made her feel better. My parents met in college and still love each other a lot, which I admire. Dad worked hard, climbing up the ladder at a big company. Mom supported him and also pursued her passion for cooking. She became really good at it and even teaches cooking classes now. They respected each other's lives and gave each other space. Growing up with them, I learned to be independent too. I wasn't great at much except studying, so I didn't go to grad school. I wanted to be self-sufficient and start my own life soon. Even though I grew up in a well-off family, I didn't want to rely on them forever. I wanted to have a family of my own, like mom and dad. I hope to make them proud by having kids someday. It might sound simple, but for someone like me, it's a big goal. Once we moved in together, Brandon started acting more selfishly. He was a grad student and worked part-time, but he didn't pitch in much for our living costs. I tried bringing it up gently, saying, "Hey, Brandon, it would be really helpful if you could contribute more of your part-time earnings towards our expenses." But he just coldly replied, "I do contribute some, you know. And didn't you say you'd handle the living expenses when we moved in together, Margareta?" Brandon always talked about wanting to be a professor, which is why he went to grad school. I had assured him not to worry about money when we got married, telling him I had a good job. I murmured, "Yeah, I did say that," feeling unsure about what to say next. Brandon sighed heavily. "You wouldn't get it. Being a grad student costs a lot for socializing and stuff. Oh, and by the way, I need money for a research trip. Can you lend me $500? I'll pay you back later." Brandon's financial pressure became more common and our problems got worse. He started spending more nights away from home, leaving me waiting by the phone with cold meals in front of me. When he did come home happy for a change, I was too forgiving. He'd sometimes say things like, "Hey, Margarita, remember you wanted to go somewhere? I have tomorrow off, let's go." He'd bring up outings out of nowhere, or compliment my cooking, making me feel special. Each time he was nice to me, I'd catch a glimpse of the happy married life I wanted, and it made me hesitate. But I knew this wasn't normal. I felt lonely and anxious, but I couldn't talk to anyone about it. I didn't want to upset my parents, who were thrilled about our marriage, but they must have started to notice something wasn't right. When I finally visited my parents after a long time, Dad suggested I stay over and have dinner with them. Mom cooked a big meal to welcome me back. During dinner, Dad mentioned my Aunt Ellen had visited recently and wanted to see me. He said she's always spontaneous like that. Ellen was lively, ambitious, and independent. "I'll reach out to her soon, thanks, Dad." Dad mentioned how much my Aunt Ellen loved me and how she always teased about Brandon stealing me from her, even though she didn't want to get married herself. That's just how she was. Before I met Brandon, Ellen was more like a close friend than an aunt. I could talk to her about anything, even things I couldn't tell my parents. She understood me better than anyone and was always there for me. At first, I was too shy to tell her about Brandon, but I wanted to see her again and show her I was doing okay. A few days after staying with my parents, I met Ellen at a cafe. She was dressed really stylishly, as usual. Ellen checked out my outfit and said gently, "You know, Margarita, marriage is just the start of a lifelong journey for a woman. You should always feel confident and attractive, no matter what. Your clothes can make a big difference, so don't forget to take care of yourself." Then she took a sip of her tea gracefully. "I totally forgot about fashion lately. I'm sorry for not keeping in touch for so long." I murmured apologetically. Ellen replied, "That's typical of you, Margarita. It's good to be honest and serious, but being too timid usually comes from lack of experience. But I was thrilled when I heard you found someone special. I thought, finally, Margarita is taking a step forward." It had been ages since I spent time with someone outside on a day off, and the weather was perfect. We sat on the terrace, basking in the warm sunlight. In that peaceful moment, I felt like I could talk to Ellen about my worries without feeling too down. I had hoped even someone as shy as me could make it work with Brandon at first. But Ellen listened to my whole story without interrupting, just nodding kindly. When I finished, she asked, "I suppose you haven't mentioned this to your parents, have you, Margarita?" "No, I even hesitated to tell you today. I didn't want to admit my weaknesses to anyone. I thought I should be able to handle this on my own, to be truly independent. I know if Mom and Dad found out, they'd want to bring me back home right away. So I want to try to deal with this by myself as much as possible." Ellen respected my decision and didn't push further, but she added, "If you ever really need help, let me know first. If my dear Margarita asks for help, I'll be there for you no matter where I am." A month later, Mom called and said, "When you have time, could you come over? It's not urgent, since I have the next day off." I went to see my parents. When I saw a car parked in the driveway, I couldn't contain my excitement. "Dad, is this car new? Did you just get it? Dad, can I really take it for a spin? What if I crash it?" I teased, feeling excited about the fancy car. "Don't worry about that. This card is for you, Margarita. Use it however you like. It'll come in handy, Mom whispered to me. We saw this car in a TV commercial, and you said you liked it, Dad recalled. So it's our gift to you. You've been going through a tough time lately, so we wanted to cheer you up. If things get tough, just drive this and come home anytime, he said with a warm smile. The car Dad got for me was an SUV from a famous foreign brand, and he even arranged a parking spot near my condo. I couldn't believe it, and I laughed in disbelief. Later, when I was driving downtown, I reached into my pocket, found the car key, and pressed the button. The lights flashed in all directions. Just then, I heard a familiar voice calling out from behind. What's with the car? I turned to see Brandon, my husband, who hadn't been home in a while. It felt like we were living separate lives. I was speechless as he looked at the car with a smug expression. Ah, I see. A gift from your parents, right? Every time I faced Brandon, I struggled to find my voice. But I was tired of feeling that way. Brandon, don't you care anymore? Do you even care about me? I managed to say, gathering my courage. Then Brandon said something shocking. Are you just realizing now? Did you really think I loved you all this time? It's ridiculous how hopeful you are. His dry laugh rang in my ears. Something inside me snapped, and I blurted out, louder than usual. Then why did you marry me? Wow, really? You're going to be that cold about it? I couldn't believe what Brandon was saying. So marrying me was just a meal ticket for you, huh? And now you want the car too because it's wasted on me? That's just great. Brandon didn't seem to care about how hurtful his words were. And if you say no, we're getting divorced. Without me, you'll never find another man. So think about it. With those words, Brandon left without a second thought, leaving me feeling angry and heartbroken, my head pounding with a headache. I sat in a driver's seat for a while, trying to calm down. Eventually, I called my Aunt Elin for advice. A few days later, I agreed to the divorce and moved back in with my parents. They welcomed me with open arms, and life started to feel peaceful again. But that peace was short-lived. One afternoon, Brandon showed up at my parents' house with his parents. They sat down in the living room, and Brandon's father spoke up in a stern tone. We're here to talk about our son's divorce. It's urgent. When drafting the divorce papers, Margareta warned Brandon, if you don't agree to the divorce, I'll use my parents' connections at the university to ruin your future. It wouldn't be hard to damage the career of a junior registrar if their daughter complains. Brandon truly loved Margareta. Her behavior was too harsh. It's clear she was trying to intimidate him. We could easily challenge the divorce, Brandon's father said, feeling deceived by Margareta. Behind her plain appearance, she's actually a mean and greedy woman. Poor Brandon. I heard she paid him to stay away. She must have had other men over. We need to go to family court and claim that Brandon was threatened by his wife. But if there's a proper apology, things might change. For example, if Margareta gives up that car she's driving, it might help smooth things over. Brandon and his parents remained silent, just listening to their parents' protests. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, and Mom went to answer it. Ellen appeared behind Mom as she came back to the living room. Sorry I'm late. How's the discussion going? Brandon's family had met Ellen once at my wedding. What are you doing here? It's rude to barge in like that. We're busy right now. Outsiders should leave. Brandon's mother objected. No, don't be like that. You've heard about Brandon's divorce, right? How would an outsider like you know about that? I had been informed by my brother earlier. I couldn't miss such an important moment for my dear niece, Ellen said, offering a reassuring glance. You're probably here to stop the divorce or for money. Can you still say that after seeing this? Ellen pulled out a stack of documents from her bag, laid them out on the table, and showed them to everyone. I hired a detective to look into this. It turns out Brandon has been cheating on Margareta with multiple women despite being married. He hardly came home because of it. He took advantage of Margareta's kindness and even asked her for money. That's ridiculous. I was just busy with my research at the university. When I did come home, we ate together and went on trips, right? We were like any other married couple, right, Margareta? Say something. Brandon, you don't need to defend yourself. We'll handle this. It's not your fault. We understand, his father reassured him. That's right. These documents from who knows where are surely lies. Our Brandon would never cheat. He's such a kind and outstanding son, his mother protested. You might be kind to your parents, but that kindness seems to end there. Like father, like son. Now, Brandon's mother, take a look at these photos, Ellen said, pulling out a picture from the documents. I recently stayed at a hotel for a business meeting and saw Nicholas there. He was with another woman, looking very cozy. So I had the detective look into Nicholas too. The results were just as I expected. Do you understand now? Brandon's mother's face went pale as she grabbed the documents and examined them closely. What is this, Nicholas? How long have you been doing this? It's all lies, isn't it, Veronica? Stop looking. Give me that. Nicholas, looking panicked, tried to snatch the documents, but it was too late. Veronica, distraught, confronted Nicholas. You've been cheating on me. The car you wanted so badly was for her in these photos, wasn't it? No matter how hard Nicholas tried to calm her down, Veronica wouldn't listen. The discussion about Brandon's divorce was forgotten as Veronica stormed out of the house, crying, with Nicholas following after her. Left behind, Brandon said, "Hey, wait, what about me?" and followed them out in confusion. The rest of us were left in stunned silence for a while, but Aylin had a satisfied look on her face, winking at me. Later, Aylin told me that Brandon's parents did end up getting divorced. You won't fall for such a terrible man again. Let's make you more attractive. I'll teach you everything about grooming yourself as a woman. Despite her busy schedule, Ellen visited me often and took me to various places like meals and shopping trips. During that time, I learned a lot from her. A year after the divorce, I made the decision to go to graduate school. I worked hard to improve myself, focusing on my studies. Time passed quickly, and one day, I heard someone call my name at a street intersection. I turned around to see Brandon. It's been a while. You've changed a lot, haven't you? At first, I didn't even recognize him. In Brandon's eyes, the woman standing before him was no longer the plain ex-wife he knew, but had transformed into an incredibly beautiful and attractive woman. Meanwhile, Brandon had fallen on hard times due to the scandal of his parents' divorce. It seemed he was no longer attending graduate school. His parents, Nicholas and Veronica, had decided to stop providing him with financial support because of the trouble he caused. He was struggling to afford his tuition and living expenses, far from the carefree life he once enjoyed. The women who used to be interested in him had left him one by one. The former glory he once had vanished in an instant, and now he found himself face to face with his ex-wife, who seemed to be a completely different person. As Brandon was about to suggest catching up, a man approached and asked, "Sorry for the wait. Are you a friend of Margarita's?" It was Leonard, the man I was currently dating. Wow, that guy is really handsome, isn't he? He's so tall. Could he be a model? Commented a group of women nearby, looking at Leonard. He's someone from my past, but it's okay. We're finished talking. Let's go, shall we? Leonard said, taking my hand and briefly acknowledging Brandon. Brandon stood there, stunned, as Leonard led me away by the hand. Without a second thought for Brandon, Leonard and I walked towards the crosswalk, and I didn't look back, keeping my gaze straight ahead as we left. Get out. James's voice was cold as he stood in our marble foyer, casually swirling whiskey in a crystal glass. Your things are already packed. I stared at the Louis Vuitton suitcases lined up by the door, the ones he'd bought me last Christmas when everything still seemed perfect. My hands trembled, but I kept my voice steady. So that's it? After 8 years of marriage, you're just throwing me out. He smirked, taking another sip. Come on, Emma. Let's not make this dramatic. We both know this marriage has served its purpose. Your inheritance helped build ClearTech into what it is today. Now that we're going public, I need someone more suitable by my side, someone who understands the tech world. My name is Emma Chen, and at 34, I was watching my life crumble around me. 8 years ago, I'd married James believing in love and forever. He was brilliant but struggling, working on a startup he swore would change the world. When my parents died in a car accident 2 years into our marriage, leaving me their life savings and family business shares worth $3 million, I didn't hesitate to invest it all in his dream. You mean someone like Melissa? I asked, thinking of his 25-year-old head of marketing who'd been spending more and more time at our house lately. The way she looked at him during dinner parties, how they always seemed to be having late meetings. James's smile widened. Melissa understands vision. She gets what it takes to build something revolutionary. You, he gestured dismissively with his glass. You were great for the early days. The supportive wife, the generous investor. But ClearTech is worth $100 million now. We're playing in the big leagues. I looked around our mansion. The sweeping staircase, the chandelier that cost more than most cars, the art I carefully selected to make this place feel like home. All of it built with my family's money, my trust, my love. The board meets tomorrow to finalize the IPO, James continued, checking his Rolex. Another gift bought with my inheritance. Melissa and I need to prep. So if we could wrap this up. I walked to the suitcases, my heels clicking against the marble floor. Each step felt heavy with 6 years of memories. The dinner parties I'd hosted to help him network, the nights I'd stayed up listening to his ideas, the vacations we'd cancel because he needed to work. I believed in him completely, had been so proud to help build his dream. You know what's funny? I said, turning to face him. You think you've won, that you've played this perfectly. He raised an eyebrow, amused. Haven't I? ClearTech is about to go public. I'm about to become one of the youngest tech billionaires in the country. And you? He shrugged. You'll get whatever the prenup stipulates, which, if I remember correctly, isn't much. I smiled, thinking of everything he didn't know. The quiet moves I'd made over the past year as I watched him grow more distant, more arrogant. The careful planning that would turn his smug grin into shock. Good luck with the IPO, James, I said, grabbing my suitcases. I'm sure it'll be interesting. His confidence faltered for just a moment. What's that supposed to mean? You'll see. I walked out without looking back, the heavy door closing behind me with a final thud. What James didn't know, what he'd been too arrogant to even consider, was that I wasn't as naive as he thought. Growing up in a business family had taught me to always protect myself. While he was busy building his empire and courting Melissa, I'd been watching, learning, and preparing. The inheritance he used to build ClearTech, I had documentation for every penny, dated, notarized, and safely stored with my lawyer. The early company contracts, all carefully preserved, showing my role as more than just a silent investor. The long hours he claimed to be working, I had proof of much more interesting activities. But my real insurance policy was something far more valuable, something that would make tomorrow's board meeting very interesting indeed. I checked into the Four Seasons, a small indulgence I planned ahead for. As I unpacked, my phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Lauren. Are you okay? Did you do it? It's done, I replied. He kicked me out just like we expected. Melissa's already moving in. That smug bastard, she texted back. He has no idea what's coming, does he? I smiled, thinking of the documents safely stored in my laptop. Documents that would turn James's perfect plan upside down. No, I wrote. He doesn't. That night, I sat in my hotel room watching the city lights twinkle below. 6 years ago, James had been a struggling entrepreneur with big dreams. I believed in those dreams, had wanted to be part of building something meaningful. The $3 million from my parents had seemed like fate, a way to honor their memory by helping create something amazing. I remember the day I transferred the money to ClearTech's account. James had hugged me tight, promising we'd build an empire together. You and me against the world, he'd said. Partners in everything. Now here I was, kicked out of my own house so he could move in his girlfriend. The wife who funded his success discarded like yesterday's news. But James had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated me. Growing up watching my father run his business, I'd learned that trust was good, but documentation was better. My phone buzzed again, this time with an email from my lawyer, Sandra. Everything's in place for tomorrow. Are you sure you want to do this? Once we move forward, there's no going back. I thought about James's smug smile as he dismissed me, about all the nights I'd spent alone while he was working late with Melissa, about how he thought he could use me and throw me away. Unsure, I replied, let's show them what I'm really worth. Tomorrow, James would learn that his perfect plan had one fatal flaw. Me, and I was done being underestimated. As I walked into ClearTech's gleaming headquarters the next morning, the security guard did a double take. Mrs. Chen. Mr. Wilson said, that I wouldn't be coming in anymore. I smiled, sliding my still valid ID card across the desk. He was mistaken about a lot of things, Tom. The elevator ride to the top floor felt surreal. How many times had I visited James here, bringing him lunch during late nights or attending company events? The modern art on the walls, the sleek furniture in the reception area, all of it chosen with my inheritance money. I could hear voices from the boardroom as I approached. James was mid-speech, his voice carrying that confident tone I'd once found so charming. Which is why this IPO will position ClearTech as the leading innovator in cloud security. Our proprietary technology. I pushed open the door, and the room fell silent. 12 board members turned to stare at me, their expressions ranging from shock to discomfort. James stood at the head of the table, his presentation frozen on the screen behind him. Next to him, Melissa's perfectly made-up face paled. "Emma." James recovered quickly, his smile tight. "This is a private board meeting. You shouldn't be here." I took a seat at the far end of the table, placing my laptop in front of me. "Actually, I have every right to be here. As a major stakeholder in ClearTech, I think the board should hear what I have to say before voting on the IPO." One of the board members, an older man named Richard, leaned forward. "Mrs. Wilson, we were under the impression that you had no official role in the company." "It's Ms. Chen." I corrected him, opening my laptop, and that impression was incorrect. In fact, there's quite a lot about ClearTech that needs clarification. James's facade cracked slightly. "Emma, don't do this. Whatever you're thinking." I connected my laptop to the presentation screen, and the room gasped. There on display was the original investment agreement, $3 million transferred from my personal account to start ClearTech, with clear terms about my role as a founding investor. "As you can see," I said calmly, "my investment wasn't just a wife supporting her husband. It was a formal business arrangement with specific conditions about my involvement in major company decisions, like, say, an IPO." The board members shifted uncomfortably, several of them shooting questioning looks at James. He had always portrayed ClearTech as his sole creation, conveniently leaving out the fact that his wife's inheritance had made it all possible. "That was years ago," James said dismissively. "The company has grown far beyond that initial investment." "True," I nodded, clicking to the next slide. "Which is why I found it interesting that you've been systematically erasing my contributions from company records. These are the original documents, and these, I split screen to show altered versions, are what you submitted to the SEC for the IPO filing." The room erupted in murmurs. Document falsification in an IPO filing was serious, the kind of thing that could derail the entire process and trigger investigations. "This is ridiculous," Melissa spoke up, her hand possessively on James's arm. "You're just bitter because my husband used my family's money to build this company, then tried to push me out when he thought he didn't need me anymore." I interrupted. "No, Melissa, I'm not bitter. I'm just well prepared." I clicked to the next slide, and James's face went ash white. There on the screen were bank statements showing systematic fund diversions from ClearTech's accounts to offshore holdings. Millions of dollars moved quietly over the past year. "Would anyone like to explain these transactions?" I asked innocently. "Because I'm very curious about why company funds were being moved to accounts in the Cayman Islands right before the IPO announcement." Richard, the board member who'd spoken earlier, stood up abruptly. "Mr. Wilson, is this accurate?" James tugged at his collar, his cool demeanor cracking. "These are complex financial arrangements for tax purposes, completely standard." "Standard?" I raised an eyebrow. "Is that what you told Melissa when you promised her shares from these accounts? When you planned to cash out together after the IPO?" Melissa jumped up, her chair scraping against the floor. "How did you?" "No." I finished for her. "Let's just say you should be more careful about what you discuss over company email, especially when the company's security system was partly funded by the person you're planning to betray." The boardroom erupted into chaos. Several members were on their phones, presumably calling their lawyers. Others were demanding immediate explanations from James, who stood there looking like his perfect world was crumbling around him. "This is a simple choice," I said, raising my voice above the commotion. "Either we postpone the IPO and restructure the company leadership to reflect its true ownership, or I take this evidence to the SEC. Your call." James stormed around the table toward me, his face contorted with rage. "You manipulative bitch," he hissed under his breath. "You're trying to destroy everything I built." "No, James," I said quietly, meeting his gaze. "I'm taking back what's mine, what we built together, before you decided to throw me away." The board quickly called for an emergency recess. As people filed out of the room, many of them already on their phones with crisis managers and lawyers, I packed up my laptop calmly. Everything I'd shown them was just the tip of the iceberg. I had more evidence, more proof of James's deceptions, safely backed up and ready to deploy if needed. Richard, the senior board member, approached me as I stood to leave. Ms. Chen, I think we need to have a longer conversation about your role in ClearTech. Perhaps over lunch? I smiled, shouldering my bag. I'd like that. I have quite a few ideas about the company's future. As I walked out, I caught a glimpse of James and Melissa in heated discussion, their perfect plan falling apart around them. He looked up as I passed, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw fear in his eyes. This was just the beginning. James had thought he could discard me without consequences, but he was about to learn just how expensive that mistake would be. The weeks following the board meeting were a whirlwind of legal negotiations, emergency board sessions, and company restructuring. I watched from my temporary office on the 19th floor, not quite the penthouse suite where James still sat, but close enough to keep an eye on things. The IPO had been postponed indefinitely. After my revelations, the board wasn't taking any chances. They'd hired independent auditors to go through every transaction, every document, every decision made in the past 6 years. What they found made my evidence look tame in comparison. They've uncovered at least $12 million in questionable transactions, Sandra, my lawyer, told me one morning as we reviewed the latest findings. James wasn't just planning to cash out with Melissa. He was setting up a parallel company structure. He was going to use the IPO money to start fresh, leaving ClearTech as an empty shell. I sipped my coffee, looking out over the city skyline. And Melissa? Any word from her legal team? Sandra smirked. She's singing like a canary, turned over everything. Emails, texts, recorded conversations. Apparently, she's not as loyal to James now that his perfect plan has fallen apart. I wasn't surprised. Melissa had always been ambitious, but her loyalty extended only as far as her own interests. Once she realized James couldn't deliver the wealthy future he promised, she'd switched sides quickly. The press had been having a field day with the story. Tech CEO's IPO dreams crumble amid fraud allegations, read one headline. ClearTech founder's wife exposes million-dollar deception, screamed another. James' reputation in the tech world, once golden, was now thoroughly tarnished. But I wasn't interested in revenge, I wanted justice. The board had been surprisingly receptive to my proposals for restructuring the company. With James's credibility destroyed and the threat of SEC investigations looming, they were eager to find a stable path forward. The board meeting's in an hour, Sandra reminded me, gathering her papers. Are you ready? I nodded, straightening my blazer. More than ready. The boardroom looked different now. The same sleek table, the same floor-to-ceiling windows. But the energy had changed. James sat at the far end, his usual confidence replaced by barely contained anger. His lawyer whispered something in his ear as I took my seat. Richard called the meeting to order. As you all know, we're here to finalize the leadership restructuring of ClearTech. Following the independent audit and extensive legal review, the board has prepared a resolution. I kept my expression neutral as he read through the terms. James would step down as CEO, though he retained a minority stake in the company. The offshore accounts would be frozen and investigated. And most importantly, I would be installed as executive chairperson, with final say over all major company decisions. This is insane, James burst out, standing up. You're giving her control of my company? Our company, I corrected him quietly, built with my family's money, my support, and my trust. Money you tried to steal, support you abused, and trust you betrayed. The board members shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up to defend James. They'd all seen the evidence, all realized how close they'd come to being implicated in his schemes. The resolution is fair, Richard said firmly. Ms. Chen's investment and early involvement were instrumental in building ClearTech. Her recent actions protected not just her interests, but those of every shareholder and employee. The vote was quick and decisive. 10 in favor, 2 abstaining, none opposed. Just like that, control of ClearTech passed to me. As people filed out of the room, James approached me, his face dark with fury. Congratulations, he spat. You've destroyed everything I worked for. I stood up slowly, gathering my things. No, James, I saved what we built together. You're the one who tried to destroy it with greed and lies. "You think you can run this company?" he sneered. "You don't know the first thing about tech." "I know about loyalty," I replied. "About building trust and keeping it. The technology might be complex, but the principles of good business are simple. Something my father taught me long ago." I walked to the door, then turned back for one last look at the man I'd once loved so completely. The leather chair creaked as James leaned back, his perfectly pressed suit a stark contrast to his smug expression. "Emily, you have to understand," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Managing this kind of money requires experience, business sense, things you just don't have." I sat across from him in his home office, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to hide their trembling. The inheritance papers from my grandmother's estate lay scattered across his massive mahogany desk. $12 million worth of assets, properties, and investments that he was so desperate to control. My name is Emily Chen, and at 42, I was watching my husband of 15 years try to manipulate his way into controlling my inheritance. The same man who had spent years subtly undermining my confidence, making me question my own judgment, was now showing his true colors in full force. "I've already spoken with our lawyer," James continued, straightening his tie with practiced precision. "The power of attorney paperwork is ready. Once you sign, I'll handle everything. You won't have to worry your pretty little head about it." The condescension in his voice made my stomach turn, but I kept my expression neutral. James had always been controlling, but he'd masked it well over the years. Small comments about my spending habits, suggestions that I shouldn't work because he made enough for both of us. Gentle criticisms about my decision-making that eroded my confidence bit by bit. But what James didn't know, what I'd made sure he didn't know, was that I wasn't the same naive woman he'd married 15 years ago. The past 6 months since my grandmother's passing had opened my eyes to things I'd been blind to for far too long. It started with a letter my grandmother had left me, along with the inheritance. "My dearest Emily," she'd written, "with this gift comes great responsibility, but also great opportunity. Trust yourself. You are stronger and smarter than they've led you to believe." Those words had struck something deep within me. My grandmother had always seen through James's facade, though she'd never directly criticized him. Instead, she'd spent years quietly preparing me for this moment, teaching me about investments, business, and most importantly, self-reliance. The day after I received the inheritance notice, I made an appointment with Sarah Chen, no relation, a financial advisor my grandmother had recommended. James didn't know about these meetings. I'd scheduled them during what he thought were my yoga classes. "Your grandmother was a shrewd businesswoman," Sarah had told me during our first meeting. "She built this fortune from nothing, and she chose you to carry on her legacy. Not your husband, not your cousins. You." Over the next few months, while James was busy plotting how to take control of my inheritance, I was quietly putting things in motion. Weekly meetings with Sarah, consultations with my own lawyer, not the family lawyer James had chosen, and careful documentation of every manipulative comment and action from my husband. I'd learned that James had been making inquiries about the inheritance before my grandmother's will was even read, speaking to financial advisors and lawyers about how to protect the assets. What he really meant was how to control them. Now, sitting in his office, watching him lay out his plans as if they were already set in stone, I felt a strange sense of calm. The fear and self-doubt he cultivated in me for years had been replaced by something stronger, certainty. "Are you listening, Emily?" James's sharp tone cut through my thoughts. "This is important. We need to get these papers signed before the estate is fully settled." I met his gaze, keeping my voice steady. "I hear you, James. You want power of attorney over my inheritance." He smiled, that practiced, patronizing smile I'd seen countless times before. "Exactly. You know, I only want what's best for us, for our future." What James didn't know was that I'd already secured my future without him. The meetings with Sarah hadn't just been about financial planning. We created a comprehensive strategy to protect my inheritance and my independence. 2 weeks ago, I quietly moved most of my personal savings to a new account at a different bank. The inheritance itself was already protected by an ironclad trust my grandmother had set up, one that explicitly prevented anyone else from gaining control without my consent. But the real surprise was something else entirely, something that would wipe that smug smile off James's face when he finally discovered it. "You seem distracted," James said, frowning slightly. "Is everything okay?" I nodded, standing up from my chair. "Everything's fine. I just need some time to think about all this. It's a big decision. He stood as well, coming around the desk to place his hands on my shoulders. His touch, once comforting, now made my skin crawl. Don't overthink it, honey. You know I'll take care of everything. That night, as James slept soundly beside me, convinced his plan was working perfectly, I lay awake thinking about how different things would look in just a few days. The pieces were already in motion, set up carefully over months of quiet preparation. I thought about the moment James would realize what I'd done, how his carefully constructed facade would crumble. The thought both terrified and exhilarated me. The next morning, James was already in his office when I came downstairs. I could hear him on the phone, his voice carrying through the closed door. Yes, everything's proceeding as planned, he was saying. She'll sign the papers this week. No, she has no idea about any of it. Trust me, I know how to handle my wife. I felt a familiar twist in my stomach at his words, but this time it was accompanied by something else. Determination. I pulled out my phone and pressed record, adding yet another piece of evidence to my growing collection. Later that day, I met with Sarah in a small cafe across town. James thought I was at my book club. Another convenient excuse I cultivated over the months. Everything's ready, Sarah said, sliding a folder across the table. Are you sure you want to do this? I opened the folder, reviewing the documents inside. Everything was there: bank statements, transfer records, and most importantly, proof of James's attempts to manipulate his way into controlling my inheritance. Unsure, I replied, closing the folder. He's left me no choice. Sarah nodded, her expression serious. The meeting with the estate lawyers is scheduled for tomorrow. James thinks it's just a routine signing, doesn't he? Yes, I said, taking a sip of my coffee. He has no idea what's really going to happen. That evening, James was in an unusually good mood. He ordered takeout from my favorite restaurant, opened an expensive bottle of wine, and was being extra attentive. I knew what this was, his way of buttering me up before the meeting tomorrow. I've been thinking, he said as we sat down to dinner. After we get everything sorted with the inheritance, we should take a vacation. Maybe that trip to Europe you've always wanted? I smiled, playing along. That sounds lovely. He reached across the table to take my hand, his thumb stroking my palm in what he probably thought was a soothing gesture. I know all this legal stuff has been stressful for you, but after tomorrow, you won't have to worry about any of it. I'll handle everything. I squeezed his hand gently, thinking about how different things would look in just 24 hours. You're right, James. After tomorrow, everything will be different. As we got ready for bed that night, I watched him go through his usual routine, checking his phone one last time, setting out his clothes for tomorrow, meticulously arranging everything just so. James had always been about control, about maintaining the perfect image. Big day tomorrow, he said, climbing into bed beside me. Try to get some sleep. I lay there in the dark, listening to his breathing even out as he drifted off to sleep. Tomorrow would indeed be a big day, just not in the way he expected. I thought about the past 15 years, about all the little moments that had led to this. The way James had gradually isolated me from my friends, how he discouraged me from pursuing a career, his constant subtle criticism disguised as concern. But I also thought about my grandmother, about her strength and wisdom. She'd seen this coming long before I had, and she prepared me for it in her own way. Remember Emily, she told me once, true strength isn't about having power over others. It's about having power over yourself. Tomorrow, I would finally show James exactly what that meant. The next morning dawned bright and clear. I watched James get ready for the meeting, methodically knotting his silk tie and adjusting his cuffs. Every movement precise, controlled, just like everything else in his life. Wear something professional, he said, eyeing my casual attire with disapproval. First impressions matter, even if it's just a signing. I nodded, hiding my amusement at his assumption that this was just another signing. While he finished getting ready, I changed into a tailored navy suit, one my grandmother had helped me pick out months ago. Every warrior needs proper armor, she'd said with a knowing smile. The drive to the law office was quiet. James kept glancing at me, probably interpreting my silence as nerves. His hand patted my knee in what he likely thought was a reassuring gesture. Just follow my lead, he said as we pulled into the parking lot. Let me do the talking. The law office of Morrison & Associates occupied the entire top floor of a sleek downtown building. As we stepped out of the elevator, I saw James's shoulders straighten, his game face sliding into place. He had no idea what was waiting for us behind those glass doors. Mr. and Mrs. Preston, the receptionist greeted us with a professional smile. They're ready for you in the main conference room. James strode ahead of me, confident as always. But when we entered the conference room, his steps faltered. Instead of just the estate lawyer he expected, the long table was occupied by several people. Sarah Chen, my financial advisor, Marcus Wong, my personal attorney, and Catherine Morrison herself, the firm's senior partner. "What's going on?" James asked, his voice sharp. "I thought this was just a signing." "Please have a seat," Catherine said, gesturing to the chairs. "We have quite a bit to discuss." I took my seat at the head of the table, not beside James where he clearly expected me to be. His face tightened as he lowered himself into a chair, his knuckles white where they gripped the armrests. Catherine opened a folder in front of her. "Mrs. Preston has asked us to review some concerning matters regarding her inheritance and your recent attempts to gain power of attorney." James's head snapped toward me, his eyes narrowing. "Emily, what is this?" "Let me explain," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I know about everything, James. The calls to your lawyers about controlling my inheritance before grandmother even passed away. The consultations about having me declared financially incompetent. The offshore accounts you've been preparing." His face paled slightly, but he quickly recovered. "That's ridiculous. I've only been trying to protect our interests." "Our interests?" Sarah Chen cut in, sliding a document across the table. "Is that why you've been making inquiries about transferring Mrs. Preston's inheritance into accounts only you would control?" James's jaw clenched. "Emily, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I interrupted, pulling out my phone. "In fact, let me play something for everyone." I pressed play, and James's voice filled the room. "Yes, everything's proceeding as planned. She'll sign the papers this week. No, she has no idea about any of it. Trust me, I know how to handle my wife." The color drained from his face as the recording continued, detailing his plans to gain control of my inheritance through whatever means necessary. "That's just taken out of context," he sputtered, but I could see the panic rising in his eyes. Catherine Morrison leaned forward. "Mr. Preston, we have documented evidence of multiple attempts to fraudulently gain control of your wife's inheritance. Would you like to explain that?" James's composure finally cracked. "Emily," he hissed, "you have no idea what you're doing. You need me. You've always needed me." I met his gaze steadily. "No, James. I don't need you. I never did. What I needed was to see you for who you really are." Marcus Wong cleared his throat. "Mrs. Preston has already taken steps to protect her inheritance through a series of trusts that you cannot access." Additionally, he paused, sliding another document forward. "These are divorce papers." James stared at the papers, his face contorting with rage. "Divorce? You can't be serious. After everything I've done for you?" "Everything you've done to me," I corrected. "The manipulation, the control, the constant undermining of my confidence. It stops now." "You'll never manage without me," he spat, his carefully maintained facade completely crumbling. "You're nothing without me. Nothing." I stood up, placing my hands flat on the table. "That's where you're wrong, James. I'm not nothing. I'm my grandmother's granddaughter, and she taught me better than to let someone like you control my life." Sarah Chen spoke up. "Mrs. Preston has demonstrated remarkable financial acumen over the past 6 months. She's already made several successful investment decisions that have increased her inheritance by 15%. James's head whipped around. 6 months? You've been planning this for 6 months? Actually, I said, allowing myself a small smile. Grandmother and I had been planning this for years. She saw right through you from the beginning. Every lunch date, every shopping trip, she was teaching me, preparing me for this moment. Catherine Morrison pulled out another set of documents. "Mr. Preston, given the evidence of your attempted financial manipulation, we're prepared to file charges unless you agree to an uncontested divorce with the terms Mrs. Preston has outlined." James snatched the papers, his eyes scanning the contents. With each page, his face grew redder. "You can't be serious. You expect me to just walk away with nothing?" "Not nothing," I corrected. "You can keep your own assets, but my inheritance, my grandmother's legacy, that stays with me, where it belongs." "This is insane," he muttered, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. You've all lost your minds. No, James, I said quietly. For the first time in 15 years, I'm thinking clearly. You have until the end of the week to decide. Sign the papers and walk away or face fraud charges. Your choice. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You'll regret this, he snarled. You have no idea what you're doing. As he stormed out of the conference room, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Years of subtle manipulation, of doubting myself, of trying to be what he wanted. All of it falling away with each step he took. Catherine waited until the door closed behind him before speaking. Are you all right, Mrs. Preston? I nodded, surprised to find that I truly was. Yes, I am. For the first time in a very long time, I really am. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. James, faced with overwhelming evidence of his attempted manipulation, finally signed the divorce papers. He moved out of our house, my house now, taking only his personal belongings. I heard through mutual friends that he was telling everyone I'd had some kind of breakdown, that I was making a huge mistake. But his words didn't have the same power over me anymore. Sarah helped me take full control of my investments, and true to my grandmother's teachings, I proved to be quite adept at managing my own finances. The inheritance wasn't just money, it was freedom, independence, and the chance to finally be myself. One evening, about a month after the confrontation, I was sorting through some old boxes when I found a photo album. Inside was a picture of my wedding day, James and me smiling at the camera, looking perfect and polished. But what caught my eye was my grandmother in the background, watching us with a knowing look. She'd seen it all coming, had prepared me for this moment long before I even realized I needed preparing. Her inheritance wasn't just about the money, it was about giving me the strength to stand on my own. I closed the album and walked to my home office, once James's domain, now my space. On the wall hung a photo of my grandmother and me, taken just months before she passed away. Her eyes sparkled with the same determination I now felt every day. Thank you, I whispered to her image. For everything. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, another investment opportunity she wanted to discuss. As I read through the details, I couldn't help but smile. James had been so convinced I couldn't handle money, couldn't make decisions, couldn't survive without him. But here I was, not just surviving but thriving, managing my inheritance, making my own choices, and finally living life on my own terms. The future stretched out before me, full of possibilities I never would have imagined when I was caught in James's web of control. It wasn't always easy. Independence never is, but it was mine, and that made all the difference.